On today's show, it's another Locked On crossover edition episode. We'll be joined by Rylan Stiles, the host of Locked On Thunder, to preview the Rockets Thunder NBA Cup Semifinals game coming up this Saturday evening. What are the biggest questions for the OKC Thunder? What are the biggest questions for your Houston Rockets? It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Drop us a comment while you're there. Give us your predictions, your thoughts on this Rockets matchup with the OKC Thunder in the NBA Cup semifinals. Also be sure to subscribe to the new daily Locked On Rockets newsletter. Would sincerely appreciate it. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. Quick shout out to a very special everydayer, my buddy Jefferson. Jefferson, I got your letter that you wrote to me. I really appreciate it. In fact, I got it printed out right here. I can honestly say this was a first. It was really cool. And I got to tell you, buddy, you got a future in sports media. If you're this passionate about the Houston Rockets already at such a young age, I think you might have a place somewhere down the line talking about Rockets basketball at some point in the future. Really appreciate the kind words. I loved hearing your thoughts about the team, and I'm going to put this letter up somewhere in the backdrop. It'll be a permanent fixture of the show from now on. So appreciate the letter, and thank you so much for tuning into the show, buddy. And now we get started with another Locked On crossover edition episode. Sitting across from me, that's my guy, Rylan Stiles, host of Locked On Thunder. I'm Jackson Gatlin, host of Locked On Rockets, and we're here to get you prepared for the Thunder Rockets NBA Cup semifinals matchup taking place this Saturday. And man, Rylan, what are we, back in the late 2010s? Because man, Rockets Thunder right there at the top of their conference, facing off in a big-time single elimination game. This has all the stuff of the previous, James Harden, Russell Westbrook era. It's kind of a throwback, man.
It is a throwback matchup in Vegas. It's going to be a lot of fun, high stakes, two teams that seem hungrier than a normal NBA team to win this NBA Cup. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And we're going to have a lot of fun kind of breaking down and previewing this matchup. I'm going to first grill Rylan about what's going on with the Thunder. He's going to ask me some questions about what's going on with the Rockets. And then we're going to get into what we're looking forward to in this matchup in particular, certain, key things, statistics and things to watch out for, all that good stuff. So Rylan, let's start with this Thunder team this season. What feels like the biggest difference between the Thunder this year compared to last season so far?
I think it's just maturity on a lot of different fronts. Number one, you got older. This is still the youngest team in the NBA somehow, but they did add Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein, who've been around the block. They've played in big games, and they just know what's required in the sense of the physicality that it's necessary. This Thunder team is very tough, very physical this year. They did a good job of that in the past, but it would wane at times. It's hard to come every single night and be the more physical team. The Thunder have done that so far this season. I think that those two guys specifically have had a big boost. Now, we haven't gotten to see the boost that we think Hartenstein will add in the sense of playing off of Chet Holmgren, that they kind of missed each other with Hartenstein hurt to start the year. Now Holmgren hurt right this second. But with the impact that you've seen Hartenstein make on the floor, it's easy to put to bed the kind of size concerns that plagued Oklahoma City last year, because at the very least, no matter if you think that they should play them together or not, you're going to be able to play a true center on the floor every minute of the game if you want to. And not only just a true center, but two centers who are high level and arguably top 10 in the NBA, which is a big difference from a year ago where they just didn't have a backup center. Jay Will tried to fill that spot. They tried to go small. They just did not have a reliable backup big last year. And then with Caruso, he just doubles down what the Thunder were already good at. You take away last year's worst defender and put in one of the best defenders in the NBA. And it's why right now they're on track to have a historic defense. They currently have more steals than turnovers as a team. Like this team is electrifying defensively. They harass you, they hound you throughout every single game. And so I think that those two additions have been the biggest difference, along with other outstanding maturity points like J-Dub becoming a better scorer.
Yeah, it's good. This game in particular is going to be a lot of fun because you got the two best defenses in the NBA going up against one another. I mean, we just walked out of a 91-90 ordeal here in the quarterfinals game against Golden State, and the final score of this matchup might be even lower than that one ultimately. Look, you mentioned the size concerns, right? And that was the thing that the Thunder dealt with last season. And again, haven't quite seen the fruits of their offseason labors to add Isaiah Hartenstein, because it's like, Chet and Hardy were like passing ships, right? Hartenstein gets ready to come back and Chet Holmgren goes out with his injury. Aside from the size and maybe the rebounding, what is, the other, is there another weakness for this Thunder team?
Yeah, I would say that they pass Shai, and you can throw J-Dub in that category. There's a way to deter J-Dub, that there isn't a way to deter Shai in terms of scoring. Like, if you really get physical with Jalen Williams, he struggles at times to still get to his spots and to still pour it in. But more often than not, he's a really good scorer, and there's no real concerns about him as a future All-Star, and could be an All-Star this year. But besides those two guys, you don't really trust anyone to go create their own offense. And sometimes you don't really trust them to pull the trigger on really good looks. Like there's a double-edged sword of the Thunder always are working and hunting for that great shot. And those great shots come more often than not, especially in the midst of an 82-game season. But against a team like the Rockets, you better take the first clean look that you get, because they've proven throughout the course of this season to be one of the league's best defenses. And at times they kind of don't walk that line the right way, where they're overpassing and they're just not confident enough to take the jumper. So the lack of an additional creator on the perimeter besides the two heads of the snake with Shai and J-Dub would be a concern, I think, for the Thunder.
SGA was already, an MVP candidate last year. He's another MVP candidate again this year. And it feels like every time I watch SGA play, Rylan, he seems to me quite, and I think this is a very fair argument to make here, the most unguardable player in the NBA. It seems like he just has counters on just, you think you have him stopped, and then he turns and hits a fadeaway, or he'll, drop a shoulder into you and, create a little bit of separation, or hit you with a step back. All these little things that he's, got as part of his overall game. Does it feel like this is the year for Shai to win an MVP award finally? Like, especially if the Thunder finishes the number one seed in the West, is there anything that can be done by another player to kind of take it away from him this season? I mean, how good would the Nuggets have to be to prevent Shai from winning an MVP?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know that there's anything another player can do, because I think on top of the Nuggets record, even if they come storming back to be like a home court advantage team, is there going to be any voter fatigue for Nikola Jokic? And whenever you're making the argument and parsing through these two cases, if there's any sort of voter fatigue that hurts Jokic, for right or wrong, we just know what happens, then you look at Shai, and if he somehow gets this team to more wins than they had last year, which they're on track for, and the number one overall seed again, while missing Chet Holmgren for the vast majority of the regular season, I don't know how you can deny it because of his efficiency, because of what it would take for him to do that. Like, he'd have to maintain this pace for the Thunder to get that mark. And so I just think that his game continues to improve to the point where he's taken these steps of first-time All-Star, then All-NBA All-Star starter, and then MVP, top five finisher, MVP runner-up. I think now is his time to win the MVP award, because he has a counter for everything, as you mentioned. Going back to that Dallas game Tuesday, he went 5 for 9 from 3. And that's the stuff that makes him unguardable now, his willingness to shoot the three ball. And sure, you can also have 1 for 10 night against Toronto, which he had a week ago. But when you go 5 for 9 from 3, Jackson, like, if you were on the sidelines for the Rockets, where would you tell your guys to pick Shai up? Because you can't pick him up too high. He's going to blow past you. You can't play him in the mid-range if he's capable of shooting the three. Like, what are you going to do? Like, where are you going to defend Shai? He's that level of player. He's that talented, and the Thunder are going to have the team success to boost his case.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, I really do look at Shai as truly he is one of the most unguardable, unstoppable players in the NBA. He's going to make you pay. His passing has gotten to a level where he can get other guys involved if a defense is geared to try and slow him down. And just, if you're putting two at the ball, whatever, trying to take him out of the equation, then he's more than capable enough of, making the right reads, getting other guys involved. And then, oftentimes the other four guys that the Thunder have on the floor are capable enough to execute out of an opportunity where they have like a 4-on-3, whatever it may be. You mentioned earlier talking about the Thunder defense, right? And the Thunder defense is a little unconventional in the sense that they turn you over, they play the passing lanes, they force all these steals. Do you ever get the sense watching this Thunder team play defense that it's, I won't say impossible to sustain for an entire 82 game season, but do you ever get the sense that, okay, if they let up on the gas a little bit, then that's where there's some holes in there defensively, because you have to be so active to make that scheme work over the course of an entire 48-minute game every single night you're playing?
Yeah, I think that there's a way that these numbers that are right now, like, are stuff that we've never seen before, and we're still not to Christmas yet. So the numbers could change. I don't think that the identity will, though, because it's predicated on guys who need their defense to complement their offense. Like Cason Wallace, Lou Dort, Alex Caruso, like those guys get going offensively by what they do defensively. They go hand in hand, and those guys have buttered their bread in this league by playing defense. So I don't really have any concerns about those people dropping off. And I think that part of the turnovers is from the construction of the roster, more so than an indictment on the other team or of the Thunder gambling, because they're so willing to switch everything and they trust these guys to guard 1 through 5. You really can make up for gambling in the passing lanes with those rotations, and you just throw so many different looks at teams that it's hard to get into a rhythm whenever one possession might be guarded by Caruso, who defends you differently than Dort, who defends you differently than Cason Wallace. Like, you just never really know what to expect. And then even J-Dub is an elite defender as of right now, statistically this season, and he's made strides physically with his frame. SGA never takes a play off. Like, there just is no one to hunt on this team to where there's not a person on this roster that you want to call an isolation top of the key and call for a switch for them to get onto you. And so I just think for those reasons, the defense will still be stellar throughout the rest of this year.
Last thing I got for you before we switch gears here and change over to some Rocket-centric discussion, but what's been maybe, I guess, the most underrated or like underreported storyline following this Thunder team so far this season? That's one of the benefits of us being, the local experts. We're following these teams every single day. So something maybe that hasn't quite picked up on national headlines yet that you'd like to share.
I think that the J-Dub being a truly high-level defender, and I think that you can put him into, like, all defensive level. Like, if he was the only defender, his all defensive case would be strong. I think that there's a chance that the Thunder somehow get 0 all defensive members because they all just steal votes from each other. Because how do you parse through Lou Dort, Caruso, J-Dub, Case, and SGA is going to lead the league in steals again, probably. Like, how do you decipher who to vote for if you're not going to vote for all 5 of them? And you still have Hartenstein, who's been an elite rim protector. I think that the storyline, it's catching up, but the Hartenstein addition, he's not just a backup 5. Like, he is someone who changes the complexity of this Thunder team with his screen setting ability to wipe you away. That's something that nobody on this roster has played with before. Like, that's something that the Thunder have not had since Steven Adams. And the last time they had him was that bubble series against the Houston Rockets. And Shai was a infant at that point. Lou Dort was an afterthought offensively. Like, these guys haven't had to benefit from a screen setter like Hartenstein before, especially the younger guys. And the way that he can create space and the way that he can create offense, like, is a big deal. Because last year you saw in the playoffs, they really lacked another table setter. And we all kind of envisioned that fix being from a guard spot. But the way that he can create with a screen, he can create with the pass in the high post. Maybe Hartenstein's the guy that is just setting the table for the rest of this Thunder offense to eat. So I just think that addition, it was loved in some circles in the offseason because they went out and did something to bolster a young roster. And in other circles, it was kind of looked at as like overpaying for a backup center. That was the perfect price to pay. Whatever you had to do to get Hartenstein in here really ties this roster together. And he's bared it out over his first month with the team.
Yeah, I never fully subscribed to the notion that he was going to be like the full-time backup five, right? Like I think the future best version of this Thunder team, right, or at least one of the best versions of this team, is eventually when you're going to have Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein situationally starting next to one another. And that's the unique thing about this Thunder team, is they can throw so many different looks at you. They can play big. Once those two guys are healthy, they can play a double big lineup. They can play small. They can take those guys off the court. There's so many different ways that this Thunder team can play, and that's one of the things that makes them ultimately so deadly. Coming up, we're going to switch gears, and Rylan is going to ask me what's going on with the Houston Rockets. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Look, with Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. And continuing on here at our Locked On crossover edition episode, we got Locked On Thunder with Rylan Stiles, Locked On Rockets here, Jackson Gatlin. Go subscribe, follow wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. That helps us both out a ton. Also, make sure to subscribe to our new daily newsletter for your team, whether it's the Thunder, whether it's the Rockets. Maybe you're interested in one of the other teams in the association. Go hit that subscribe button. All right, Rylan, let's talk a little Houston Rockets. What you got for me?
The first question I have was one that was posed to me today, and I didn't quite know how to answer it, which is why I need to bounce it off the local expert, Jackson Gatlin. Jackson, who should be the most threatening player on Houston from an offensive standpoint? Of like, you look at this Thunder defense, and you have the pecking order of Lou Dort and Caruso and Kaysen. Who should give Thunder fans the most fear entering Saturday?
It's absolutely going to be Alperen Sengun. It shouldn't be any of the perimeter players for the Rockets. Look, I know in the last meeting between these two teams, the one where the Rockets eked out that 3-point win, Fred VanVleet had an insane performance, right? Dropped 38 points. That is an outlier performance. That's not something you can rely on. That's Fred just having a massive game where he was on fire and could not miss. And definitely, was the engine of the Rockets offense in that game. But the Rockets' most consistent offensive threat all season long, and the guy who really makes this offense hum, has been Alperen Sengun. Every single action involves Alperen Sengun in some capacity, whether it's him as the screener, whether it's him catching the ball on the short roll and making a play from the middle of the floor, whether it's him posting up down low or isolating at the top of the key and then just trying to get downhill against opposing bigs. Alp is the most dangerous offensive player on this Rockets team. Now, he doesn't quite necessarily have the ability to, I guess, pop off the way that like Fred VanVleet or Jalen Green can if one of them gets hot from three, but he is the most consistent offensive force, and Thunder fans should be well aware by now that when you deal with Alperen Sengun, he's got a level of both now power and finesse in his game that he's going to get you in foul trouble. It doesn't matter who you put on him. I'll be honest, though, Isaiah Hartenstein has done a pretty solid job on Alp this season, but his ability to get to his spots and use little fakes and jabs and misdirection and playing off defenders with his eyes to freeze the defense, all the little things that he has in his game make him really difficult to contain, and that's got to be priority number one for the Thunder, is trying to slow him down, because if you slow him down, you basically stagnate the rest of the offense. So with Alpi, of course, he's going to be the engine. What has been something that other teams do successfully against him? Is it playing a small ball five, getting up under him? Is it playing a lumbering big man that kind of push him around, somewhere in between? It's weird because historically he's actually done really well against some of the bigger, more like lumbering or lengthier centers in the league, where he's just found ways, like maybe he'll struggle the first couple possessions or so, and then he'll figure it out and he'll learn, okay, well, I need to go up and under, I need to get around them and get to the rim, whatever, drag them out a little bit so he can attack in space, that kind of thing. This season in particular, though, first off, his efficiency this season is just completely down. He is not finishing around the rim very well this season, which is not something through his first 3 years. He was great finishing around the rim. So that's a bit of a concerning trend for him, although it's one that we hope kind of regresses back towards, the norm sooner rather than later. And it can be attributed to a number of different factors. Maybe it's the increased effort and output defensively. He also really worked on his body this offseason. Added a ton of strength, especially around his core that he's talked about before. And that's really helped him, especially in the rebounding department, fighting, down low with other bigs, that kind of thing. But for him, it's really been smaller, kind of those mid-size wings, 6'8", 6'9", who have guarded him this season. And I think it's partially because those guys are able to get away with a lot more physically, right? When you put a smaller player on a big, the small is usually able to get away with some extra, hand checking, holding, two-arm shoving, that kind of stuff. And that's been something that has kind of frustrated him at times. And Ime Udoka has spoken about this. Alp, his kind of Achilles heel at times can be his tendency to want to look for fouls rather than looking to make the right basketball play, looking to just score the ball at the rim. He's looking to initiate contact or bait with the ball and then get somebody slapping at his arms before he goes up for the finish. And that part can be a little bit frustrating. It's a little reminiscent of back when James Harden was on the Rockets and he was so elite at drawing fouls, but sometimes you could tell that he was explicitly playing for the foul rather than playing for the best possible shot or the best possible basketball play. And that can get a little bit frustrating at times. So definitely smaller guys who have been put on Alp have caused him a little bit of trouble so far this season. And also just the way that OKC defends, being able to swarm and send two at the ball, his decision-making is going to have to be incredibly crisp, and he's going to have to make very quick decisions in this matchup for sure.
One last Alpy question. Did you ever watch Mythbusters where they'd, pose a
of course,
hypothesis and then you have to see if it works? Okay. One of my favorite shows to watch on True TV. Jackson, bust this myth if you can. Alpy can't play defense and gets played off the floor.
Oh, that myth has been busted, Rylan. Okay. Look, Alperen Sengun has absolutely bought in and embraced the defense-first identity that Ime Udoka has brought to this team. Look, I'll be the first to say, absolutely, first couple years of Alperen Sengun's career, definitely had a lot of work and a lot of growing up to do on the defensive side of the ball. Last year was his first chance to play in a system and play for a team that didn't expose his weaknesses on a night in, night out basis. Under Steven Silas, Alperen Sengun played exclusively in a drop coverage scheme, and that's not his strength as a big. He's not, he doesn't have a huge wingspan. He doesn't have a ton of height. He's not, a guy who can, is a vertical spacing big or who can get up and, is an athlete or anything. You have to play to his strengths. And so what Ime Udoka has done this season is he's found a defensive scheme where he allows Alperen Sengun to primarily, usually Alpy's checking, the worst shooter on the opposing team. So there's been a lot of matchups where Sengun doesn't even guard the opposing big man because they want to keep him out of as many of those actions defensively as possible. But then on top of that, they also roll in, different things like switching or I guess pre-switching off the ball to be able to keep him away from those actions. But that's also allowed him to be the weak side rim deterrent at times. And so far this season, Alperen Sengun has comparable numbers. He's contested more shots at the rim this season than Giannis, than Miles Turner, than Jarrett Allen, than Victor Wembanyama, and he's doing it on comparable rim defensive efficiency as all those guys. And he's contested more shots. So he's effectively, I said it earlier this season, he's really become a bit of a two-way force here where you don't play him off the court. Obviously, there's going to be certain situational matchups for like the final possession at the end of a game or something where you want 5 switch everything defenders. But the scheme that the Rockets run with him, where they allow him to at times, if they want to put 2 on the ball, kind of a little bit of a show and recover defensive scheme, he's bought into it. He's been successful with it, and he's absolutely one of the pillars of what's made this Houston Rockets team one of the best defenses in the NBA this season.
So from one of Rockets fans' favorite subjects to some's least favorite subject, Jackson, what's happening to my king, Jalen Green? I mean, I said on the NBA draft show before his draft that he would win 2 NBA scoring titles. That looks like one of the dumbest things I've ever said, which is saying a lot. What's gone wrong for Jalen Green? Why is he not flourishing?
I feel like I could really boil this down to like the most simple answer, which is just he's a shooting guard that at times really can't shoot and just hasn't had a consistent outside shot. The outside shot unlocks everything for him. It really does. When he can't shoot from outside, defenses are able to sag off of him. They're able to treat him as a non-shooter at times on the perimeter. But it's a layered issue because there's some games where he looks like he could be a future star. And then there's other games where you question if he had an impact at all by the end of a game. So at this point for Jalen Green, some of it boils down to the Rockets have just identified other ways to win aside from just relying on Jalen Green to get 20, 25 shots up a night and hope that he's hot and hitting from the perimeter. They play a majority of their offense through the 2-man game of Fred VanVleet and Alperen Sengun. Alperen Sengun gets a lot of reps in the Rockets offense, as we already talked about extensively. But Jalen Green still gets plenty of opportunity. He still gets plenty of run with this team, but he, at times, the decision-making is a little questionable. He's this elite athlete, but then sometimes you'll watch, and there was a moment against the Warriors in the quarterfinals game where Steph Curry was guarding Jalen Green and just applying a little bit of ball pressure, and Jalen just folded and just, kicked the pass back out and let somebody else attack the Warriors defense. And that's kind of, I think, the biggest weakness is you apply a little bit of ball pressure to Jalen and it's almost game over. Like, he doesn't have the tightest handle. It's a little loose. And if he can't put the pressure on you by getting downhill, and if he's not hitting shots from outside, there's really not any other way that he's impacting the game offensively. So that's kind of been the issue with him is some games he's hot and then other games he's not. And thankfully in the games where he hasn't been shooting well, he's still found and grown in other aspects of his game. He's able to defend at least at least a reasonable level where he's not a negative on that side of the floor. He hustles, he makes loose, he'll dive on the floor for a loose ball and help you win a game. He does the dirty work plays. He does the things that you want to see a winning player do on the basketball court, but the offense has just been wildly inconsistent. It's been a roller coaster, to say the least.
And then I think that something nationally, like outside of the Houston market, that could get lost is that this team took a step last year in an extremely positive direction. They just didn't have the benefit the Thunder did. And like, with all due respect to Oklahoma City, their play-in bid that they had 2 years ago was really gifted to them. Like with the Mavericks bowing out and not even trying on the last week of the year to keep their draft pick, they were able to back into the play-in tournament, get that big win in New Orleans, and then that put the exclamation point on their stepping stone season, whereas Houston didn't benefit from that kind of chicanery at the end of the year. But now they've taken yet another step, similar to Oklahoma City last year, where they go from the play-in to the 1 seed. What has led to this launch of Houston?
I think you can point to a couple different things. First off, the Rockets did lose Alperen Sengun, who was their best player last season. They lost him for the final quarter season stretch. However, that did directly coincide with Jalen Green playing literally the best stretch of basketball of his entire career, where he went absolutely supernova in that month of March as the Rockets had their 11-game win streak, and they were making a significant push for that final play-in spot right there neck and neck with the Golden State Warriors. So getting Alperen Sengun back, having him healthy, definitely helps a ton. But one of the biggest additions has just been having Tari Eason. He's such a difference maker for this Rockets team. He only played about a quarter of the games last season, had like a weird leg injury thing that he had to have surgery on. This year, you have Tari Eason back, being able to bring him off the bench. He's just an energizer bunny where you plug him into a game and he is literally all gas, no brakes the moment you check him in, and he causes havoc on the defensive side of the ball. He's a defensive playmaker is the term that I like to use for him. But then you also pair him with Ime Thompson, and those two guys, dubbed the Terror Twins, they are legitimate game changers for this Rockets team. Being able to have a starting five that is as effective as the starting five has been for the Rockets, right? They take care of the basketball. They generate decent quality or high quality shots realistically, but they just don't have the greatest shooting percentage across the board. The shooting is kind of the death knell for this Rockets team. But even in games where the starting lineup maybe doesn't have it, right? Being able to go to those two guys, those two incredibly impactful defenders off the bench, guys who you never need a play drawn up for them, right? They find ways to scrap and claw and generate second and third and chance opportunities off of offensive rebounds and forcing steals and turnovers and transition, all the little things that they do. That's probably where the Rockets have taken the most significant strides forward this year. So I would couple it. I'd say Tari, Eason healthy, Ime Thompson year 2, who's already defending like one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA, if not the best one. Sam Vecini crowned him the best defender in the NBA the other day. And I take Sam Vecini is goated for a reason. There's a reason you put a lot of stock in what he says, and I trust his analysis there. And then also Alperen Sengun's defensive improvement. So the Rockets doubled down on their defensive identity from last season. They flirted with being a top defensive team. They finished, I believe, around 10th by the end of the year. And then this season, they just improved considerably, right? They just said, no, we're just going to be that team that gets it out of the mud. The offense is never going to be pretty, but we can rely on and bank on our defense every single night that we go out there and play.
My last one before we get into the nitty gritty of this specific matchup is the Jimmy Butler question of like 2 years ago, whenever this Thunder team was young and they were a surprising, last year, I should say, last year they were a surprising top of the Western Conference. Everybody was beating the drum nationally for them to go make a big move. And locally, we all knew that like, hey, wait till the summertime, then things get easier. Like it was almost annoying to hear the outsiders say, oh, they're just punting on one of their best chances. Where is it at with Houston? You do have a lot of young players. You also have veterans like Fred VanVleet, who the Thunder didn't have a year ago. Is it a mixed reaction? Should they go get Jimmy Butler? Is that even real?
Not real in the slightest from everything that I understand and from the people that I've spoken to. The Rockets are definitely content to do nothing and to just kind of see this group, move along and develop and grow internally. I would be absolutely shocked to see any kind of a big mid-season acquisition happen for this team. Especially, again, it's if it did happen, it wouldn't be an over-the-hill star. The only way that this Rockets team would cash in and trade or touch any of the core 7 or any of their future stockpile of picks is if they were able to get a quote-unquote star player that is a little bit closer and matches the timeline of their already young core. So I would very safely say that, the 7 young core players, they're not going anywhere at this deadline. I highly doubt that Fred or Dillon would go anywhere at this deadline. Now, I will say all of that with the caveat that the Rockets do have a mountain of expiring contracts this season. If you add together the contracts of Steven Adams, Jock Landale, Uncle Jeff Green, Jayshawn Tate, and Aaron Holiday, all of which are either expiring or non-guaranteed or team-controlled contracts. That's $40.8 million that they have to play with. Now, doing a big 3-for-1, 4-for-1, 5-for-1 trade mid-season is complicated because teams have to have the requisite roster spots to be able to absorb those contracts before cutting and waiving and doing all that stuff. So you'd have to facilitate a third or even a fourth team involved in any kind of a big deal that they were going to swing this season. That would be the only type of move that I could see this Rockets team making is capitalizing on some of these expiring contracts, either by, absorbing some future assets, providing some salary relief to an opposing team, whatever. Or I floated this idea the other day, and I'm going to have to tackle this in a show much more in depth a little bit later on. But Zach LaVine is a guy that you could probably get for all this expiring salary without giving up, maybe any assets, honestly, depending on how much Chicago would value all the salary cap relief. And he's a guy that you could very easily, plug into this team, whether you bring him in and slot him into the starting 2-guard spot and move Jalen Green to the bench or what have you. That could be a possibility. But aside from that, I don't see any of the other key pieces of this team going on, being traded, and certainly not for, how old is Jimmy? 47 now? It's not happening. Not for Jimmy Butler. Coming up, we want to talk about the specifics of this Rockets-Thunder matchup, what to expect, what we learned from the first 2 meetings earlier this season. The Thunder got the better of the Rockets in the first one in an absolute blowout. The Rockets edged out the Thunder with a 3-point victory in the second meeting between these two. So what can we expect from their play in the semifinals? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5, just $5, and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one spot. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you actually place your bets. Just go to FanDuel.com and join today. And while you're there over at FanDuel, take a look at all the different odds available. Check out their parlay builder. Check out the different season awards specials, or just the outright favorites to win this year's Super Bowl. Right now, the Lions plus 280, the Chiefs sitting at plus 500. Right behind them, the Eagles at plus 550. And rounding out the top five, you have the Bills at plus 650 and the Ravens distant fifth place at plus 1,000. So all those odds, so much more over at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And final segment here at our Locked On crossover event. Rylan, what are you most looking forward to in this game? What matchup excites you the most about this game?
Yeah, I think that it's going to be the Thunder's rotations in this one because there's kind of two schools of thought that you could see them going with. They've had a very fluid starting lineup to this point in the year. They've been clearly better with Cason Wallace in the starting five. Isaiah Joe is more comfortable coming off the bench as a shooter. His splits kind of bear that out. But in this game against Houston, it's the two best defenses in the NBA. Do you double down and just try to get this game into the mud and lean all defense in this game, make it messy, and you get to the end just like 5 games ago, and you say, well, it's a close game late. We have the better go-to score. This is how we're going to try to win the game. Or do you try to lean on offense and play Isaiah Joe more, play Aaron Wiggins more? Wiggins on Tuesday only got 9 minutes, and he's their very best shot creator off the bench. But he is a lesser defender than the other guys the Thunder can throw out there. So those type of intricacies of how the Thunder want to play this, do they want to try to get more offense? Do they want to just have a defensive battle in a throwback game where maybe these teams don't get to 90 points as the two teams labored on Wednesday too for Houston and Golden State? I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, at this point for the Rockets, I do really worry about what they're going to do and where they're going to get their offensive production outside of Alperen Sengun. And even with Alperen Sengun, as consistent as he has been for the Rockets this season, he really struggled in the first matchup between these two teams. He only had 11 points on 3 of 12 shooting. That was a game in which Chet Holmgren really, really bothered him, right? I talked about earlier against some of the lengthier bigs in the NBA, the shot blocking bigs, what have you. In the past, he's found a lot of success against those guys, but this season in particular, it felt like he's struggled here and there situationally with some of those guys. No Chet Holmgren, obviously, in this game. He has to deal with Isaiah Hartenstein, still a very capable defender, but a very different defender stylistically than Chet Holmgren. And Sengun did have a better overall performance in the last meetup between these two teams. 20 points, 7 of 17 shooting, not a great, efficient night for him, but he was a lot more successful in that game, also snagged 14 rebounds. So it's the offense starts with him, and then it just it sounds so simple to say, but it just boils down to, at that point, will the Rockets shooters be able to actually knock down shots? And I fully think that Ime Udoka is going to treat this game exactly how he did the first cup game, where he's going to play like a playoff rotation. He's going to treat it like a playoff rotation. You're going to see 7 guys get a brunt of the minutes. It'll be the Rockets' 5 starters, and then Ime Thompson and Tari Eason. And then more than likely, it'll be Aaron Holiday again in the rotation, supplanting Reed Sheppard. Not because Reed Sheppard's been bad or anything this season, but he's a rookie, and Ime wants to trust his veterans to try and bring home this game.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a lot of fun and a lot of intrigue for these two coaches. I think they're two of the best in the NBA. They have a chance to have some chess matches through the course of this game, especially with what you mentioned in the second segment about defending Sengun with a smaller big and then kind of giving him Isaiah Hartenstein and just throwing the different coverages at him, how much that you swarm Sengun and not really worry about the ripple effects from that because you can't trust Houston shooters. And I just think that this game has a chance to be one of the best regular season games of the year because you look at what happened on Tuesday and Wednesday of how seriously both these teams took the game. Ime's playing a playoff rotation. Rockets fans are crying after the game of beating Golden State. And like I say that endearingly, like I have never seen a spaces after a game like that, except for college football. Like college football is the only sport I've seen with that much passion and kind of intrigue on a spaces post game. And the Rockets brought it for one of 82 against Golden State, which obviously meant more due to the streak and everything. But you look at what happened the last time these two teams played, which was only a week ago, when the Rockets got the win and they're on Instagram Live. And, of course, the Thunder have a note of that. Like this could be something that is ferocious. Money's on the line. And anytime that's the case, the intensity ups as well. It's in Vegas. Two young teams who are still looking to prove something. This is a tangible thing to do with the NBA world watching yet another night where you're the only show in town. And we saw what that brought out of these two teams this week on Tuesday and Wednesday, whenever it's one of only 4 games on. So I just think that this whole intensity is good for both teams. For the Rockets, they haven't gotten with this core to the playoffs yet. The Thunder have, but just one trip, and one of the 2 series was just completely uncompetitive, where you blew out the Pelicans in 4 games. So getting another test in an environment like this, I think, will be fun.
Dude, I mean, I use the Thunder as an example constantly of a young team that has experienced high leverage basketball going all the way back to the bubble series when Chris Paul had that ragtag bunch of that oh my God. Do you remember the guard trio, Dennis Schroeder, Chris Paul, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander?
The 3-guard lineup.
What a trip, man. Like, what a throwback. But I mean, yeah, like legitimately, right? I think you can point to that series and how much of an impact it had on Shai's development, right? And his trip to the playoff series previous to that with the Clippers, right? And the fact that he got some high leverage reps very early on in his career. And you're right, this Rockets team hasn't experienced that level of basketball yet. Of their main rotation guys outside of Fred and Dillon, nobody on this roster has playoff experience. Nobody's played a single minute of playoff action outside of those 2 guys in the main part of the rotation. I'm also at this point, one thing that I'm looking for out of Ime Udoka is what is he going to do if certain guys are underperforming? He's got a tendency, especially with Fred, when Fred is struggling, to leave him on the court, right? He's like his safety blanket or whatever. And there have been a lot of games this season where Fred has really struggled and probably shouldn't have been one of the final 5 guys closing out a game. If he doesn't have it offensively against the Thunder, especially with as stingy as their defense is, that's going to be a big question for me is, will Ime sit Fred and go with a different 5-man lineup to close things out? Will he go with Amin Thompson in that spot potentially and play, maybe more so through Alperen Sengun at the end of a game, what have you? That's been kind of the one sticking point for Ime this season, is he's had this tendency to go back to guys who have been struggling rather than last year where he was very quick to pull the trigger and sit a guy if you were struggling in a given game.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a curious standpoint for the Thunder as well, because they, even in the postseason, like the actual NBA playoffs, they were playing 10, 11 guys. And so I don't think that they're going to shorten their rotation at all. But what does it look like if you sit Shai at the start of the 4th quarter, as you typically do, and the Rockets go on a 5-0 run? Like, how quickly are you going to get them back in this game? How are you going to treat, that kind of sequence whenever you are 1 game away from the NBA Cup championship? So the rotations on both sides of what they are going to elect to do, it sounds a little bit more cut and dry with Udoka playing, the shortened lineup against the Warriors. But again, the elimination games against the Dallas Mavericks, the Thunder were still rolling out 10, 11 guys. And that's been their MO this season as well. I think that they're going to dip into that rotation, but you could see them zag a bit toward the end and play Shai more and really get that minute total up for him as kind of the leader of this team. I'm also curious about the environment. Like last year, the NBA Cup, they got lucky that it was the Lakers in it. They had a little short drive over there. These are teams that are very far away from Vegas. And don't really have any pull in Vegas of like a nearby fan base. Can they get this place rocking and give it the feel it needs? Is it all just neutral observers who will cheer for every bucket? Is it fans just in town for something else and they go to the game and sit on their hands? Like, what is the crowd going to be like, and how's it going to feel?
Yeah, honestly, as much as I'm a huge fan, Rylan, of the NBA Cup, I don't like the Vegas element of the NBA Cup. I don't think you need the Vegas element. I think it's just the NBA is kind of trying to shoehorn Vegas as like the next big thing, and they're preparing for the eventual expansion whenever they do add the new, Vegas team to the NBA, all that stuff. And so like I get it from that perspective. You're trying to inject some life and some energy into the regular season. Kudos to Adam Silver and the rest of the NBA. It worked. They did it. But I think you're kind of robbing fans of these teams of the experience of hosting these games, right? Like the Thunder should be hosting this game, in my opinion, right? Rather than the teams flying out to Vegas. Thunder were the number 1 seed. Cool. Rockets face off against them. Awesome. Host the game. And then if you move on from there, then maybe you do a neutral site for just the championship game. I don't know if that would make a little bit more sense at that point, because then, how do you only go by point differential across the two, East and West conferences of, who decide where you get the home court out of in that matchup, what have you. But, it's been a success in the sense that you're seeing, very high leverage basketball being played in the regular season. You're seeing games that matter in the month of December. And even though the players, you go to practices, you go to the games, you talk to these players and coaches, they downplay it, right? When you ask them, hey, does this feel like a different game? And they're like, no, it's just another regular. But then you see them in the moment, you see the reactions, you see the emotions, you see how seriously they take it. And it absolutely has a playoff vibe, playoff atmosphere, high stakes, all that good stuff. And in a game like this, with a rivalry that runs as deep as the Rockets Thunder rivalry does, it should feel like a playoff atmosphere. But you're right, I am a little concerned this year that it maybe doesn't, I guess, meet the threshold that it did last season. And in part, that's also due. We gotta throw some shade here at the NBA itself and like the media partners and whatnot for just downplaying so much of the young up and coming teams and stars in this league. Like SGA is a bona fide superstar, and he should be getting all the praise and all the love in the world for it. And yet I feel like it's just they want to rehash the same tired old stories about LeBron, Steph, trade rumors, all this stuff, rather than gassing up the number 1 seed in the Western Conference and their MVP caliber talent leading the charge. And then even for the Houston Rockets on TNT, the Rockets are the number 2 seed in the Western Conference. And Charles Barkley spent 15 minutes like just lambasting the Rockets for being a team that doesn't know how to win basketball games, doesn't know how to play the right way. And it's like, well, clearly they're doing something right. They're the number 2 seed.
Yeah, that's the biggest flaw, I think, for the NBA is how it is covered by and large. And I also just think that, to your point about shoehorning in Vegas, let them have Summer League. That's a really awesome thing. But like, why not? If you're going to just be hell-bent on the neutral site stuff, which is fine, why not put it in a basketball hotbed, like in the Garden, where every player in the world has their best nights. Like every player loves to play there. It is a city.
Because then all 29 other teams would cry foul and be like, no, it's home court advantage for the Knicks.
And that's the precedent for sports, right? Of like the Super Bowl every year could technically be played in the home venue of an NFL team. That's for their actual championship. Like that's for the real deal. It could be played. Like the Bucks won a championship in their home venue, for Tampa Bay. And so like the Mecca is a place where every player loves to play. It is a hotbed. It's a melting pot of just people from all over, easy to get to, and just an overall appreciation for basketball in that region, to where even if it was these same 4 teams and New York isn't involved, Brooklyn's not involved, I would still trust them more to bring the energy necessary to appreciate a game like this than an awkward turnaround in Vegas. Because I mean, I'm sure that there's many people listening to this on both sides who would love to be at this game. Jackson, how could you get to this game whenever you don't even know if your team's officially going until Thursday night? Like you don't know the official matchup until Wednesday night, whenever the final buzzer sounds at midnight. Like it's just too hard and too quick of a turnaround for like common fans to get there, unless you're just some millionaire listening to this pod, in which case cut the check. We appreciate any donations.
Yeah, but, we take sponsors. You want a banner at the bottom of the page? We got you.
It's just too hard. I mean, I don't know. I think that there could, if you want to make Vegas work, it could be like a season ticket thing where, hey, if you have Thunder season tickets, the team's going to fly you out to Vegas this weekend if you're able to go, and they're going to get you out there, and they're going to have a supporter section, similarly to how like colleges will send their campus student section to the Rose Bowl, and it's like these college kids are going to get a trip of a lifetime. Like do something like that if you really want this to work.
First off, I love that idea. I think that's a fantastic idea. We got to somehow find a way to like run this up the flagpole, get Adam Silver on the phone to make this happen, because that would be one surefire way to, you have the neutral fans in attendance, but then you also have, a collective of fans of both sides of the teams, and season ticket holders aren't just, I feel like you say season ticket holders and people envision like just like the, snobby people sitting courtside, whatever, who don't really care about the game. No, like you could be a season ticket holder and like sit up in the 400s, right? Like you can have access to, this potential, idea of yours and be like a kind of a regular everyday, Joe Blow diehard fan of the team. And those are the types of fans who should be in attendance for a game of this magnitude. I'm fully in agreement with you right there. Any final thoughts before we wrap this one up, Rylan?
Man, I think that it's going to be an all-time social media night on Saturday night, because your fan base is just insane, which incites the Thunder's fan base. And if Sengun goes off, that trade will be talked about all night long. It's just everything about this game, will be crazy. If the Thunder win, they're going to bring up the Instagram Live from 5 days ago. If the Rockets win, they're going to bring up the Sengun trade. There's just going to be fireworks Saturday night, Jackson.
It's going to be so much fun, and we are going to have you guys covered for all of that action. Win or lose, whatever happens, we're going to have instant post-game reaction pods breaking down what happened for both sides, the Thunder side with Rylan, the Rockets side with me, so be on the lookout for those. We appreciate you for tuning in, whether you're here on the Thunder feed, whether you're here on the Rockets feed. Thanks so much for being here for this crossover episode. We appreciate you for tuning in. The best way you can support our respective shows, subscribe and listen on a podcast platform where you choosing every single day. Subscribe on YouTube, drop a comment, give us your thoughts, give us your predictions on this game. Rylan, we didn't come up with any predictions. Did we do a prediction here to wrap things up?
Yeah, we got to do a prediction. I'll let you go first.
I'm going to say that the Rockets eke out a nail biter. And I'm going to say that I'm going to add one more, just talking about a quick stat here. The Rockets are one of the best teams in the NBA at not turning the ball over. I believe it's second. They're the team with the second fewest passes per game in the NBA. And that kind of plays directly against what the Thunder are so good at, right? The Thunder love to play the passing lanes. They lead the league in steals, deflections. That's how they ignite and generate so many of their offensive opportunities and get those mismatches and everything in the half court. So the Rockets, as a team that traditionally take very good care of the basketball, last game when they did win against Thunder, they only had 10 turnovers. It kind of takes away one of the biggest weapons of this OKC team. So if they're able to do that, if they're able to take care of the basketball, and if they're able to get a good, strong performance from Alperen Sengun, I like their chances, even if they don't get another 38 piece from Fred VanVleet. So I'm going Rockets win. I'm going to say 105. 102.
I like it. I think it's going to be a close game. In fact, I think that the Thunder win at the buzzer from SGA. They pull out a buzzer-beating, turnaround baseline mid-range J, and they eke out a win. I think it's going to be what we described earlier, where it's a defensive battle. The Thunder get it into the mud. They have the ball last, and then they just have one of the best scorers in the league who gets them a win.
Don't even say one of the best, Rylan, the best scorer in the league. Come on, put some respect on Shai's name. I'm doing it for you, but most unguardable player in the association. That's going to do it for our crossover episode. We appreciate you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked on Thunder or Locked on Rockets.